you're here again. Swedenborg Community Victoria, our chat this evening, part of our regular Swedenborg discussion group. It's lovely to welcome Jack Dunyan, Reverend Jack Dunyan from British Conference of the New Church. I've known Jack for, it's been a while, mate, hasn't it? It's got to be 30 years or something, or other, a long time. So it's, you know, it's great to welcome Jack. Jack also does a regular radio broadcast on Lomond Radio, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the chat. I will say, for anybody who's got any questions or wants to say hello, if you're watching online, please do feel free to pop something in the comments. If you're watching on Facebook or you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to type a comment, type a question to Jack, and you know there'll be opportunity for us to share those later on. So please do feel free to say something, say hello, let us know you're here, and we'll deal with those questions later on in the evening. So I will say that we have our face-to-face audience here.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody.
So Neville's here to join us, so he gets first dibs on questions. So look, welcome, Jack. It's great to have you here, mate, and I'm really pleased to be able to welcome you to this. And what I'd like to start with is just, you know, a sense of you as a person. You know, who are you? What are your interests? What do you do? Tell us about yourself.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, David. Well, I'm born and bred in the west of Scotland, in a town called Dumbarton, which is a very historic town, claim to fame there. It's got a thing called Dumbarton Castle in it, which was used as a garrison since the 10th century. So it's quite a prolific place historically. I was born there. A population of, well, it's not huge. It's probably a few dozen thousand at the most.
Okay.
I grew up in I would say a relatively socially deprived area of Scotland, and didn't do very well at school. And from there, I kind of progressed into a working life and done better in that environment than I did in a school environment. I've got four children. Unfortunately, I lost one of my kids, but 4 kids, and they're all grown up now. And my daughter's got 5 daughters, so I've got 5.
Oh, you're a granddad.
Well. I'm a granddaddy, yes. And my oldest granddaughter's 16 now, so
okay,
I've been a granddad for quite a while.
Yeah, okay.
I'm quite happy to have more.
Yeah. Can I ask you just about Dumbarton? So, I mean, you know, Jack, that I spent my formative years in Paisley, which is not that far from Dumbarton. A fairly industrial town, I think, and it was on the Clyde River. Was there like shipbuilding and stuff going on in Dumbarton, or had there been shipbuilding in Dumbarton?
Yeah, it's huge history of shipbuilding up and down the Clyde, actually, all the way up to Glasgow. But Dumbarton was I think it was one of the very industrious sort of areas. And the Dennies, I think it was, that owned the shipbuilding there. And obviously that mushroomed after the war, and during the war. And apparently the Clyde was churning out a warship every 8 days on the Clyde. I mean, that's a significant contribution to that war effort to defend the country. But the Clyde's a very interesting place, because if you go up to the top of the Clyde, you've got the Clyde submarine base.
Yeah, okay.
That's there for a very good reason, because it's when you come in from the Atlantic Ocean, you can't really come in to that particular area without getting seen. And this is why Dumbarton Castle was a garrison, I think, as well. You could see the Clyde, and nothing could invade from the Clyde without getting spotted. So you need to come up the Clyde estuary in order to reach the Faslane base.
Yeah.
So it's a very strategic area for the country. So the ships were all built along there, and obviously during the war they were trying to bomb all that, so there's quite a lot of history around the Clydebank Blitz and things.
Yeah.
But the Denny's built Dumbarton, I think, to house their workers originally. So this is possibly where the bulk of Dumbarton came from, and that was in the valley. And you've got Loch Lomond to the north, and Loch Lomond is a huge, huge stretch of river. And because it's on a height, there's 7 rivers run into the Loch Lomond, and there's only one runs out. So it runs out at quite a pace, as you can imagine, and it gushes down the Clyde Valley. It's called the River Leven, and it's the second fastest river in Scotland. So that's very famous for its fast currents and so on.
Okay.
But that runs right through Dumbarton into the Clyde estuary.
Yeah. So my sense, look, growing up in Paisley in the 80s, was that Dumbarton would be a town in decline at that time. Shipbuilding was tending to move out of the Clyde, as I remember. Is that correct?
It appears, definitely, yeah. It appears that the shipbuilding kind of stopped from the Dumbarton sort of area. Maybe Greenock, Dumbarton, all sort of fizzled out and moved up, sort of closing down all the way up to Glasgow.
Yeah.
So Dumbarton was left really struggling for jobs and things like that. There wasn't a great deal more going on. Yeah.
So I mean, that the reason I ask those questions is because it plays into the town you grew up in. You know, to me, I get a sense of a town in decline. There's not much in the way of employment opportunity. That's kind of where you were. Lots of socioeconomic challenges around at the time you grew up. Yeah.
Well, I was born in a sort of relatively affluent area, and when I was 13, I moved into a completely different environment, which there's a thing called the Scottish Scale of Social Deprivation.
Okay.
I'm not sure I'm getting that exactly right, but it's made up of 6,000 boroughs, and they put all these boroughs into categories based on their drug taking, criminology, single parent family, and so everything that makes up a kind of socially deprived area.
Yep.
So I moved into an area that was in the bottom 5%.
Yeah. Okay.
Canterbury, and it was quite a shock to a 13-year-old moving into that environment. So I had to learn how to survive in that environment. Yeah. So that was a really sort of experience.
Yeah.
Growing up, and I stayed there until till my kids were grown, really.
Okay. So early working life, what were you doing early working life?
Well, I left school and tried a couple of wee government schemes. I think we called them community industries was one, where I learned how to paint and decorate and build basic structures with bricks and stuff. And then from there, at age 18, I joined the Territorial Army.
Oh, okay.
I was in the Territorial Army for 12 years, but I was still able to work in civilian life.
Okay.
Did various different jobs, bonded warehouses and labouring. I was always working at something, but while I was in the Territorial Army. And sometimes I was called away to different areas while I was in the army, but the employers always had to give you time off, so it was quite good.
So when you say different areas, within the UK or overseas?
No, within the UK, it's almost like a home defence sort of outfit. The territorial, well, it was at the time the Territorial Army. I know the Territorial Army has progressed now. They go into Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff, but that was never anything I was called to do, thankfully.
Yeah,
I trained some of the guys that did later on go there. So I keep in touch with them through Facebook and stuff. So
be aware of what they get up to. So where does Swedenborg come into your life? You know, how did you discover Swedenborg? What was your reaction to it? How did you get on with reading what can be fairly intense, writings?
Aye, well, very little in the way of education, because when I was younger, there was quite a lot to deal with, really. I had quite a very difficult childhood, I would say. Although I got a lot of love from my family, my childhood was very difficult, and obviously growing up in that socially deprived area that I had been brought up in a kind of contrary way to that, that presented a lot of difficulties as well. There was gang life going on, and I get sucked into that, really. When you're younger, you don't get a choice of where you live, where you go. So you just need to make do with what you've got. So growing up in a single parent family, 4 other siblings, I get drawn into the gang life, and really for about 10 years, I would say I lived in hell. Really, it was a really, really difficult place to be. And when I got to my early 20s, I got to a stage where I didn't want to live anymore. Just felt life was really cruel, and didn't want to deal with it. So it was maybe about 2 o'clock in the morning, I decided to go down to the local cemetery, pouring a rain, and I was going to take my own life. But I kept on seeing my mother, and I kept thinking I couldn't do that to her. So I then felt I was completely trapped, and I was blaming God for this, because I couldn't get out of the world I was in, and I couldn't even die. So I was trapped in a world I didn't want to be in. So God got the brunt of it, really, and I had a really heavy fallout with God. Although God had always been a personal relationship for me, and somehow I didn't associate that with a church. I was brought up a Catholic, so I was always attending the Catholic church on my mum and dad's sort of pressure. But I never really associated that with my relationship with God. My relationship with God was speaking to him in private and so on, just a friend more than anything. So that was the God that I fell out with. And I went through a really, really difficult time there. But eventually what I started to do was read the Bible, because I felt I had nowhere to go. And one night I put the Bible under my bed and I fell asleep, and I had a really profound dream. There was a crowd of people standing in front of me, jostling to try and see this important person in the middle of the crowd. And I was at the back, and I was crying because I felt I was the lowest possible thing you could have on earth. I just felt totally nothing, really. And because I felt it wasn't really what was happening, but I felt as if I was being rejected by the whole world. So I turned to walk away, thinking, what would they want with me? And just as that happened, the crowd opened up, and they were all looking back at me. And I could kind of sense they were looking at me in a way that it was, what does he want with him? And I looked through this crowd, and it was a corridor that had opened up. And God, Jesus, was sitting on a big rock in the middle of this crowd. And he looked at me and smiled and said, John. John's my family name. And when he smiled, it was like I could write books on it. It contained absolutely pure love, unconditional love. And it enveloped me. And when he said my name, I realised that he knew every single detail about me. And I mean every detail. And yet he still loved me with unconditional love. And the effect it had on me was super profound. I could not exaggerate the effect it had on me. And I woke up for that dream. I was physically weeping, and I felt absolutely filthy, because the purity of what I had just experienced was something I didn't deserve. And I went into the shower that morning, and I was literally trying to scrub myself because I felt so dirty. And in that moment, I realised the dirt isn't going to come off the outside, it's in the inside. And that was a turning point. That was when I realised that it was me that was causing all this. It wasn't everybody else. It was in here. And I had to clean up my act in here. So then I started to search, and there is a point to this story. I started to search, and because I was brought up in the Catholic tradition, I used to have to go into a church called St Patrick's Church in Dumbarton.
Yeah. Okay.
And I read in the Bible one night that it says, "Go behind closed doors and pray." So I decided to go into this chapel that I used to go into because it was always quiet during the day. And I was away from Bellsmire, where I had moved into, because it was quite embarrassing for me to get caught getting into a chapel because I was involved with the gang stuff.
Sure. Okay.
So I was kind of hiding in a sense. So I went into the chapel, and when I came out of the chapel, a guy came walking past who was associated with the same stuff I was associated with. Well, I thought he was. And he caught up with me, and I was trying to get away because I didn't want him to ask me why I was in the chapel.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had to tell him a wee white lie and say I was lighting a candle for my granny.
Okay.
And he started talking to me about a church that he went to. So one night I was sitting in the house, and he came to my door, and he started telling me about this church, and he was asking me if I wanted to go, and I was like, "Oh, false prophets," and stuff like that. Thinking all that stuff.
Very unsure.
Very cautious. And he produced this small book called Light, and he said, "Have a read of that." So I was like, "Right, okay." I wasn't really intending reading it, but being polite. So I got the book, and I started to read it, and it was like about correspondences of the hands and all that. I thought, do you know what, that really makes a lot of sense. But I thought, well, I'll read it, and I'll be cautious, and if I see anything, as I always did, I'll be away. I'll be taking anything to do with it. And I just kept reading it, and I couldn't find anything that would contradict reason, sort of thing. It was like really interesting.
Okay.
And then he kept coming up with the door. But cut a long story short, he asked me to go to his wedding. And I wasn't going to go, but I was quite a passive person. I found it difficult to say no to people.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to go to his wedding for one reason or another. And when I walked into the church, Robert Gill was the guy doing the wedding. And the church was the New Jerusalem Church in Paisley.
The church in Paisley, yeah.
Yeah, you'll be familiar.
Very familiar.
We all lined up at the end of the service, and Robert was coming, he had his robes and all that on, and he was coming along. Yeah. And I was terrified, I thought, he's going to shake hands with me. And he came along the line. And when Robert got to me, he just looked at me, and he had this big, broad smile on his face, and I thought, he knows too much about me,
He's been briefed already.
It was as if he was looking right through me. So it was quite I'll never forget that. But, cutting a long story short, I began reading Heaven and Hell. And the thing that struck me about Heaven and Hell was that it described everything I had been living in. It really resonated with the gang life and all that. The thing, it was a completely inverted society. So whereas you would, in the church, you would get respect for being a good person, the environment I was in, you would get respect for being a bad person, but it was a fear respect. It wasn't a good respect.
Yeah.
So it was completely inverted. So everybody, in order to get promoted in that environment, would have to do wrong. Whereas in the church, everybody would have to do right. So I thought, how could Swedenborg know this? It was almost as if he was inside my mind, telling me what had happened in my whole sort of life. I thought, how can he know that if he's an academic and he's not been in hell like me? Yeah. How can he know all that? So that really lit me up like a Christmas tree. Not just that, but also the idea that, because what I used to wonder was, how could a God who is pure love condemn a child in Africa, for example, that has never known Jesus? How can he be condemned for no knowing Jesus?
Just the place of
things. Yeah, they kind of things put me off religion. But here was something completely different. It's like it really resonated with me.
Yeah,
massively.
Yeah.
And it completely overwhelmed my emotions and feelings. And I remember I was pacing up and down, hyperventilating because of what I was reading.
Okay.
I began to realise it was true.
Yeah. So quite a visceral response, really. you know, it seems to me yeah.
I mean, I remember my sister asking me if I was okay because I was quite weepy all the time. And I remember just saying to her, I'm just happy.
Yeah.
Because what I had been looking for my whole life was right there.
You'd
I
found.
found it.
Yeah.
I definitely found it. And I thought from now on, I'm going headlong into this. Totally dedicated my life to it. Because it was the truth. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And I had been looking for it my whole life.
Yeah. So when would that have been, Jack? What year would that have been that you discovered the church?
I think about 1991. And I know that because I've got a book that I got for becoming a member of Paisley Church in 1992.
Okay.
I was in the church for about a year before I became a member.
Yeah.
So 91, I think, would have been a bit right.
Okay. So then tell me about your journey into ministry. I can't remember when you were ordained. I know it was after we were back in Australia, so after 2000.
2009, yeah.
2009. Yeah. So tell me about that journey.
Well, when I started going to the church, I was doing things like this sounds a bit silly, but I was going about picking up litter and things and putting it in the bin to try and live the faith that I was seeing. I wanted it so much, and I wanted to make up for all the things I'd done in the past. So I was doing things like that, but I suddenly realised that I didn't really have a good education. I didn't have anything to contribute. I thought, what can I do? So I began to explore, areas that I was interested in. And one of the things that I had worked with was the young people in my area, trying to keep them out of trouble. So I was very interested in that. But I also identified there was something missing for the society I lived in terms of spiritual stuff. And that also resonated in Swedenborg. And I thought, this is why we're dealing in a world of effects rather than causes. And I thought getting into the church is much more related to causes. Because I realised that what was happening from within me, and that I had control of that and that only. So teaching that to other people was a big desire for me, for especially young people. With hindsight, I believe it was probably because I had more confidence with young people because they're willing to be taught and things. If I'm honest, I think that's why I really took to young people originally. But I also love children and I love young people, so there was that in there as well.
Yeah.
So I decided, my dad had his own business, a cafe, and I worked in that for a wee while. But I was getting up at 5 in delivering sandwiches. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do.
Remember Pam actually remembered sandwiches.
Sandwich Express was my dad's business.
Yeah, that's
it. Done rather well at it, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So I remember one day I phoned up the Clydebank College and I asked for a course that I could go on that would help me to work with young people.
Okay.
And they said that the only thing they've got is social care. So I was like, I'll take it.
Right.
I just wanted to do something. So I says, I'll take it. And I went into the course, but I couldn't really spell anything over a 4-letter word. And I couldn't write. I could only print, but not very well. But computers were just coming in at the time. So I decided to go for this course and just do everything on a computer.
Okay.
And I had a very supportive tutor in that college who kept on encouraging me. I think she must have seen something in me. And I kept trying, and I submitted all my stuff, and I ended up being placed in a place called Dumbarton Centre for working with adults with learning disability.
Okay.
And I took on a project, and I ploughed my heart and soul into it, and ended up having a big construction made at the back of this building for raised beds for people with wheelchairs and stuff. So a huge project, and everybody said that I wouldn't be able to do it. But I did complete that, and I completed the course in the college, and I got a merit for that. And I couldn't believe it. I was like denying it. And my tutor says to me, why don't you go for the higher national certificate next year? And I was like, oh, no.
Yeah.
I could never do that. Higher national.
Yeah.
So I had to get maths and English higher to even get on the course.
Okay.
Couldn't do that. But
Yeah.
lo and behold, I just kept going and I kept on getting merits. So it was kind of building my confidence. And I realised here I can actually do this. And then I went for an interview in the place that had the placement. And to my enormous surprise, everybody wanted me to work there. And I was given a really good job as a key worker. I worked there for 5 years and then moved to a community project because I had a desire to take people into the community and actually, rather than sit in a classroom and learn how to get on a bus, I wanted to take people out and let them go on a bus. So we started a new project. So it went from strength to strength, really. But then when I was moving into I would say it was the lower level of the social work department, kind of progressing up the ladder, I started being asked to do things that I wasn't really happy with in order to be able to get further. I just felt that I couldn't express my faith freely. That I was learning because
I see.
Just rewinding a wee bit for 7 years prior to that, I had studied also part-time with Church College. So while I was working full-time, I had been studying Swedenborg.
Yeah, okay.
Like informally and formally. It was just my life from then on. I was studying them all the time.
Yeah.
And I got to the stage where I couldn't express my faith in my work. And I felt this urge again to find a spiritual reason why society was like it was. But I couldn't express that because the social work department were really against religion.
Yeah, I think you wouldn't be alone in that. I know I've spoken to a number of people who have felt that there's this block when it comes to expressing faith or any kind of spiritual input into working with people, and especially within the government. I think, people in government is very, very sensitive about, what keeping that line very clear. So yeah, I think you're not alone in that.
So I think that is what really triggered in me a calling to the ministry. And I remember it grew, and it got to I was waking up every morning and I couldn't think of anything else. And I was kind of in denial because I didn't feel that I was ever going to be the kind of minister that maybe Robert Gill was, because Robert was my mentor throughout this period of time.
Yeah.
And I could not aspire to what Robert was, so I didn't feel that I was ever going to be able to be a minister. But this nagging feeling just began to really eat at me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I remember dreading talking to Robert Gill about it.
Yeah, okay.
Funny enough, see, as soon as I mentioned it to Robert, it was as though he was waiting on me.
Yeah, okay.
It was really strange because I was thinking that he would have turned around and says, "Oh, no," But it was like it completely changed. It was as if he was waiting, and then everything just fell into place, as though Robert kind of already had a plan for it or something. Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was the Lord's plan. I don't know, but it did feel as if, from then on, it was a very easy road to get down.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, as you said, sorry, just to butt in, Jack, but you'd said at this point you'd already been studying Swedenborg quite extensively. It's not as though you were just entering college for the first time. You'd covered off some courses. You were well on your way.
7 years distance learning. So I was already well past year one. For the college. The colleges get 3 stages, I think, year 1, year 2, year 3, before you get your diploma. And I was well past stage 1, the accredited sort of prior learning. was quite high when I moved into the ministry itself. So I had plenty of preparation, and I had also been working, as you know, you'll remember back in the day I used to go to Purley Chase and work with the young people.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's where we first met each other. Yeah, Purley Chase camp with a middle school, I think it was.
Aye, that's right. Aye, 13 plus.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
So can I ask? You know, Swedenborg's often regarded as being terribly difficult to read. Yet you've found it to be, I mean, you found Heaven and Hell a very emotional experience. How was it diving into some of the other texts?
I think the social care training, you know, the academic sort of side of it, prepared me a lot for that.
Okay.
Whereas the actual work that I was doing had been prepared through my time on the streets and things, you know, interacting with people, circumventing danger and all that stuff, and identifying with young people, why they were doing what they were doing and so on. But the academic side, I do remember I used to read like Acts of Parliament and things, and these are written by lawyers and all that, you know.
Yeah, okay.
So I would look at an Act of Parliament, it was way over my head. But I started to discover that if I just highlight key words, I only needed 4 for a big long sentence to understand what it was saying.
Yeah, okay.
It was like, so to me, it was looking as if it was dead simple, but they were complicating it. So I started to simplify everything.
Okay.
And also, Swedenborg's writings are simple, I think, because he writes in small paragraphs, especially in Heaven and Hell. And I would read maybe that whole paragraph, and then I'd read it again, and then suddenly, boom, a light would come on, and I would get it.
Yeah, it would land.
What beautiful warm oil being poured in the head and into the heart. It was just a beautiful experience when the penny dropped.
Yeah, lovely.
They say the teacher appears when the pupil's ready. And when I get it, and it's so lovely. So that encouraged me to keep going, I think. And I've, over the last maybe 35 years or so, I've become quite good at mixing in academic circles as well as socially deprived circles. You know, I can talk to anybody really, but I've got a great confidence knowing that at the end of the day, no matter how good people look in society, or are we up there or are we down here, we're all the same when it comes to spiritual issues.
Yeah.
And we've all got needs that are the same. So I don't any longer see that hierarchy of people. It's just people. And there's no ratio between what is finite and what is infinite. So we're all in the same boat in a sense. So I've got that confidence that when I meet somebody that I see towering above me, they're still a person and they've still got feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a big help to get that confidence.
Yeah. So you were ordained in 2009. Did you become the minister in Paisley at that time, or was it later?
Yes. I was ordained at General Conference in the Hayes, and I took over as part of a team. I started a small project called the Bridge Team. The Bridge Project. And in my civilian life, in the area, the socially deprived area I was in, I had also been a volunteer, and I was a founding member of something called the Bellsmire Development Trust, whereas we got £2.2 million lottery money to build a community centre in Bellsmire to try and address the social deprivation. I'll just briefly explain that, because what happened was the local councils didn't want to allow lottery grants or help people with filling in lottery grants, because the lottery would come in, build a big community centre, leave, and then the council was left with it.
Yeah, okay.
So what the National Lottery did was they sent a team directly into the community and called a meeting. And I think that was maybe 2010, so I must have been early ministry for me. But that experience where I took a I took that up, and I ended up being the vice chairman of the project, and we interviewed the architect, and we got the community centre built, and so I was part of all that, and I learned a great deal about funding and how to get funding, and so that taught me quite a bit. So when I got ordained, I started something called the Bridge Project in Paisley. So the idea was that I went to the social work department, and they didn't want to know anything about religion or what you believed, only what you did. And then I went to the church, and they didn't want to know anything about what you did. They just wanted to know about what you believed.
What you believed, yeah.
Hence the Bridge Project. I was
bringing them together. Very good.
Together.
Yeah.
So myself, Robert Gill, and Esther Byrne, Esther from Ireland, who was also ordained into the church, we started the Bridge Project, and we had a steering group made up of the Paisley members. We met regularly. So we ended up getting some lottery grants and things, and started the nursery at Paisley, and tried to bring that forward to bring in young people. It was quite difficult because people are quite adverse to change.
Yes.
So it was, although people wanted to change, it was quite difficult for them to do so. So it was there was a lot of headwinds in that direction. And Esther, sadly, passed no too long after that.
Yeah, okay.
And then, because Esther was quite important in terms of connecting with the female side of things in the nursery, I tried it for a while, but it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And the Bridge Project sadly didn't work, but I learned a great deal from setting it up. So but I was then becoming more and more involved in the ministry, and Robert was stepping back into retirement at the time. My predecessor. So I mean, Robert's a very wise man, and he was definitely stepping back to allow me to take the reins. I can see with hindsight. So gradually, I took over as minister at Paisley, really. In a very gentle sort of mentoring sort of way. Yeah.
And it's a lovely way to do it, Jack, isn't it? Because, to have someone in the background who can guide you through, has shown you the ropes. I know, when I first started teaching, I had that. I was actually doing I was replacing someone going on maternity leave, and we had an overlap of 6 weeks. So I was starting at the beginning of the year, and she was going on mat leave 6 weeks later. So we kind of shared classes, and to have that mentor to work alongside, help share your problems and your struggles, and she shared some of hers with me, and it was just a lovely way to enter a new job. So that's great that Robert was able to do that for you. Yeah. I'll just remind anybody who's watching, as a few folk online, if you've got a question for Jack, please do pop it in the chat. We can put it to Jack later in the session. So I'm sure you've got questions. He's quite an interesting journey he's had. So yeah, please do even just type in hello. Let us know you're here. It'll be lovely to see. So Jack, tell me about uLmRgIdDyhHBq8qm05. What's your history with uLmRgIdDyhHBq8qm05? How did that come about?
Okay. Well, that was really born out of the lockdowns for the COVID-19.
Okay.
So everyone was getting locked down, and there was some Facebook groups starting, because there's quite a lot of vulnerable people in my area that couldn't get out of the house, and so we started a big Facebook group, and all it was anybody that's available, take medicine to such and such a house, or drive such and such a person to hospital, or there was always something needing done. All the practical stuff, So everybody was really gathering round, which normally happens. I mean, everybody says that. Everybody speaks about disasters, but sometimes disasters bring people together. And that certainly was the case in my area. Always is, actually. So there was a great sort of rush to help other people. And then my cousin, Alan Caldwell, got in touch with me, along with Paul Lucas, and the two of them were really radio ham enthusiasts, and they were looking to start a radio show from their bedroom.
Yeah. Okay.
So they had already got it off the ground, and they asked me to meet them on Zoom, and I went and had a meeting with them, and we talked about what could be done, what I could do, and I worked out that I've got the 11 o'clock service at Paisley, so if I was doing something on a Sunday morning, it would need to be a bit earlier. So we come up with the time at 9 o'clock, that I would do an hour at 9 o'clock of chat.
Even that's
music.
a bit tight, it seems to me. You do a 9 o'clock show to 10 o'clock and charge out of the studio and head to the church for 11.
Well, here's a secret in case everybody didn't know it. It's actually recorded in my bedroom.
Oh, in your bedroom?
So,
that's your studio?
I don't do it live.
Yeah.
It's recorded. It's pre-recorded. So I do everything from my bedroom, and there's a radio station software that I can link up with to load the recording up to the radio station.
Very good idea. Good idea. Was it a long-standing interest you'd had, or was just the circumstances of COVID that meant that this was a necessity, really?
Well, to be honest, the church, as much as it's a fantastic resource and it's useful and provides spiritual nurture and has the Lord's word and shares it with people, there's a bureaucracy in the church that I find very restricting. Yeah, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, as you said before, people aren't used to they're not used to new things, are we? We have this kind of love-hate relationship with change. There are some things we can see need to change, but we still want to hang on to the things that that we treasure, that we prize, and that prevents change from taking place very often.
Absolutely, aye. And I've got a lot of sympathy because I'm now getting to the age myself that I'm beginning to get stuck in my ways a bit. Swedenborg talks about the human bones corresponding with doctrine in the church, and the more and more the doctrines of the church are taken on board, the more sort of brittle the bones become, sort of thing. So I think it kind of corresponds with the human body. They're very, very subtle and bendy when you're younger, but they begin to get more and more set in their ways when they're older. And I'm beginning to feel a bit of that myself, and it's maybe time to pass on to the younger people. So I've got a lot of sympathy with that, and it's natural. I think it's natural. Possibly it could help to pass things on to younger people, maybe a bit like Robert did with me. But I did meet some quite heavy headwinds. And when I took the radio station on, it brought back to me what the passion that I came to the church for in the first place, which was to spread the writings of Swedenborg among what I would call my people. Yes. The people that are socially deprived and struggling and trying to get out of their environment, trying to get out of their rut. And I wanted to bring that to other people. And it was always my desire to do that. Yeah. So here was this radio station with a chance to be able to communicate with people and not just use religious hymns and religious words, but actually talk to people and take what Swedenborg had taught me through the writings and what the Lord's word teaches through Swedenborg's writings. Take that and express it to people in practical, real ways that they can take it and use it in their lives. And the radio station for me, I was able to then say, I'm taking that on in my own time. Okay. And I was offered some help for various different people within the church. Lovely, lovely people with the best intentions. But I didn't want it to be part of what I was doing in the church. I wanted it to be free so that I could express it in ways that I want and use music that I wanted. Yeah. Without people being upset that I didn't use the right words and so on. It was kind of a freedom for me that I was able to do that. And I do believe that's worked very well. People do get a lot out of it. And even now that it's sort of out the greenhouse, if you like, and it's beginning to flourish a bit, I can now integrate it more into the church because it's now got that base and that momentum.
Yeah.
That it would be difficult to, to me, I look at it like a tree. If a tree grows that way and then grows that way, you'll never straighten it again. You can get it to grow that way again, but you'll never get it straight.
Yeah, yeah.
So that younger sort of growth of the radio station, I think, is important, that it happens outside of the church and then bring it in to merge with the church. So that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. Okay. And do you get much in the way of feedback? Do you hear from your listeners?
I do, yeah. Very encouraging, actually, because when you're speaking to an audience that you can't see,
yeah,
you just don't know, do you?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's the same on camera. You're looking at this machine and you're having to imagine who you're talking to.
Definitely, aye. And I do really enjoy getting feedback. So sometimes I get phone calls, sometimes I get texts, sometimes I get emails sent to me or sent to the radio station, or people just feedback to me in the street. I've met people in the street that have mentioned to me, I really enjoy your radio show, and I'm taken aback because when I went to a wedding in Dumbarton and I was sitting there, my cousin was getting married, and I'm sitting there, and a guy sits beside me that I knew vaguely, sort of years and years ago.
Yeah, okay.
I remembered his name was Neil, and I said, "Hi, Neil, how you doing?" And we started a conversation. My wife was sitting here, I was sitting here, he was sitting there, and I mentioned something, and he says, "Oh, you said that in your radio station."
Yeah, okay.
You watch it, he's like, "Oh, I don't miss it. I watch it every week." And I was like, taking it back, but so I get that experience quite a bit. Not a huge amount, but
it's enough. And it's encouraging, isn't it?
Interestingly, it seems to happen when it matters. We're just at the point of getting up and thinking, "Why am I doing this? Do I need to do this?" And somebody will come along and say something lovely, and you think, "Wow, of course I should be doing this."
It makes it worthwhile, doesn't it? When you have that impact on someone, and you're obviously doing something which is of value to them, it just makes the world of difference. It doesn't matter what your job is, but if you're making a difference to someone's life, then it's gold, absolute gold.
Absolutely, David. I actually got a text it was an email just recently for a lady in Norway.
Okay.
The radio station is online, but and it's sort of broadcast on digital radio across the Clyde Valley and right on to Glasgow. So there's a potential audience online of about 1.4 million, I think it is.
Okay.
But it's also online, so anybody in any country can listen to it. So I got an email from Norway, and it was a lady that said to the radio station, she says, "Please pass on to Reverend Jack Dunyan that I watch his show every week and I love it." And she said, "I went to church when I was younger, but I didn't take to church. But I listen to that show every week."
Yeah.
So, well, I need to keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, Jack. It's great to hear that sort of story. Now, talking about listening, one of the things we said we do is look at how we listen to you on Lomond Radio, because I know I've been asked that question here. So I'm going to share my screen, and you're going to talk me through how to get onto Lomond Radio. So there we are. There's my browser. So what do I need to type as a URL here?
If you just type Lomond Radio, all the one word.
Lomond Radio. It's come up because I've got .co.uk. There we go. Let's see what happens. I think last time we tried this the other day, it took a while, eh? Oh, that's pretty quick. Okay, so what do I do now?
Well, if you go to the where does that say station info on the menu bar?
Yep.
And then go to listen again.
Listen again. Okay. Let's see what we come up with. Okay, so I can see, I'm not seeing all, oh, here the photos are coming up now.
Well, this is all the presenters. There's about 40 presenters on Lomond Radio.
Can I ask, are they all recording in their bedrooms?
No, some of them are brave enough to do it live. Not me.
Okay. And they've got to go into the studio to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
So I scroll down, do I, until I find your picture or your name somewhere?
Yeah, you'll see me standing, I think, on my wedding day in a kilt, I think.
I think it might have been the same photo we used for the promo for this. Let's see how we go. Oh, there you are.
There we are. There we are.
Look at that dashing photo. So you click on that.
Yep, and that
And then
produces a list of all the backdated shows.
Okay. It's interesting that Google Translate came up there, mate. Obviously, someone struggles with your accent.
That doesn't surprise
yeah,
me.
there you go. That's how you get onto to Jack. And there's a lot of shows here. How far back does it go?
Good question.
Looks like it goes
really
back in here.
Yeah, I've also got a thing called what's it called again? I wish I had been better prepared. I never thought that I was going to be saying about this, but it's a Mixcloud platform where you can visit.
So what we'll do, Jack, is if you send me that link, and I'll put the link to Loman Radio, Listen Again, and your Rise and Shine show. I'll put that in the description for the video. So anybody watching the interview, after we finished, will be able to just click on the description and they'll get that direct link. So if you send me that link through, I'll pop it in our description.
Right, David, I will do.
There's a couple of options there.
Yep. The other thing I should have said is you can listen live as well at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, UK time.
9 o'clock Sunday morning. So hang on. What time is it for you now? It's 20 past. Is it 20 past 9 for you at the moment?
Yeah. So would that be 8 o'clock for you in Australia?
It's 20 past 8 in Melbourne at the moment. Mind you, so you're going to daylight saving on the weekend, and we're going on daylight saving in a week's time. So that obviously plays with when, but it's still, it becomes 9 hours, I think, instead of 11 eventually.
I think most people can Google what time it is in the UK now anyway, I think.
This is true. Google is a great place to find that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay.
You would just go to that same page, but rather than go to the listen again, you would just click on live, listen live.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's fabulous. Okay. Well, look, mate, we were going to talk about freedom and reason. So, I mean, for me, it's an important topic in Swedenborg's spiritual output. What's the particular fascination for you?
Well, linking in with the environment I grew up in, and the hell that I grew up in, and seeing other people growing up in that same hell, I find it very interesting that Swedenborg turns the idea of freedom on its head. And that resonates with me in terms of how I grew up and what I experienced freedom to be like. So most people in that kind of environment would think freedom is just doing whatever you want.
Yep.
But what Swedenborg would say is that freedom is actually compelling yourself not to do things.
Okay.
Which is a bit of a paradox in a sense.
Yeah. Okay. So not being bound by your own kind of base desires, I suppose, or your body tells you to do one thing, but you're actually in control of it. That's the sort of idea, is it?
Aye. And putting that, say for example, somebody decides to take drugs. They would say that freedom is being able to take drugs. So they would take drugs and for so long, but after a wee while they wouldn't be able to not take drugs. So what looked like freedom has kind of led them into slavery. And now they've not got a choice. So the freedom masquerades as freedom, but it just draws you into slavery. Now, what Swedenborg would say real freedom is to refrain, compel yourself not to take the drugs.
Yeah.
That would be freedom.
Yeah, okay. So to be in control of your own desires rather than be led by them.
Yes, I think there. And then Swedenborg's idea of freedom and reason together. So, I mean, I often think this links in very well with people that are going through times where their children are having difficulties in adolescence. Because as children, I remember I used to say to my kids, there's a big chocolate mountain in Scotland, you know, up the north of Scotland. And they would say, oh, take us there, you know. But then, you know, that's when they were 8 or 9 years old, because they just believe it, you know.
Yeah.
And then I'd say to them when they're maybe about 12, 13, there's a chocolate mountain in Scotland, and they go, is there? You know, they would be a wee bit curious, but they wouldn't. They must be telling the truth, but I'm not sure. Tell them that when they're 16, 17, they'll be like, aye, right, Dad, sure.
Yeah.
Pat you in the head, you know, is it? You'll be okay, Dad, you know. So what's happening there is they're beginning to form their own reasoning.
Mm.
And as they get to adolescence, Swedenborg talks about how young people switch their allegiance from their parents to their peers.
Yep. Okay. To their
The
peers.
reason they do that is providential, because that's the Lord's providence leading them from control of their parents so they can develop their own mind.
Yes.
Because it's essential they have that ability to reason.
Mm.
And they get to a stage where they start to look at the world and look at how the rain connects with the ground and how things grow and everything's connected. And they start to say, oh, there must be an intelligent designer behind all this.
Mm.
So that reasoning process leads people to realise there must be an intelligent designer, which we call God. And at the same time, freedom gives that person the ability to choose whether or not to believe there is a God or not. Mm. So freedom linking in with reason, I think, is crucial. And a lot of parents don't really realise what's happening, that they're separating themselves from their parents in order to be thinking individuals, be free to make that choice, because it's essential that we make the choice of receiving God's love. Yeah. Because love can't force itself on you. You need to be able to reciprocate it. So through reasoning, we reach a stage where we can reason there is a God, and we can freely choose to believe in a God by applying it in life. And then, of course, the Lord gives us his word just to make sure that we know he's there and we can sort of reason. So that, for me, is the gist of freedom and reason. And, of course, we've got two faculties that animals don't have, which is the ability to receive God's love and God's wisdom. And these are the two places we receive it, in freedom and in reason, or the will and the understanding. So for me, understanding that, if society was to teach these things, it would make it much easier for parents to understand what was happening to their children. And being deprived of that knowledge, I think, is to the detriment of the whole of society.
Yeah. I mean, especially, the teenage years are hard, aren't they? From both sides. I mean, the kids struggle with it, the parents struggle with it. But of course, as you say, it's a natural and a necessary step in the process, isn't it? For, as you say, from believing everything mum and dad say to questioning it, you know, and listening to their friends, and then being able eventually to make up their own mind. And, you know, look, as a parent of kids who've made it through that transition, you still don't always agree with where your kids end up, but you can see that, you know, they're making up their own minds, and it's interesting to watch how sometimes they, in unexpected ways, come back to, you know, to the kind of qualities you yourself tried to espouse. So, for example, our eldest daughter, at some point, she was doing quite a bit of childcare, and she would talk about these childcare duties she was doing, and she was parenting those kids exactly the same way we parented her, you know, and that was her choice. She'd kind of come full circle. She'd never acknowledged that, or, you know, she's far too independent for that sort of thing. But you could see how she was reaffirming coming to those same sort of values and stuff that we tried to teach her. But yeah, it's a difficult process, and you would have seen that both as a parent but also in that youth work role that you were playing in your working life too.
Yeah. I think one other concept that Swedenborg makes clear that I think is very important for parents to know, and every parent should know, is they'll not always notice that children growing up into adolescence don't actually see any of their behaviours. They only see their experiences. So a child could be super selfish and doing the most selfish things imaginable, but never see it. And yet one tiny wee thing that's said to them out of place, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
And everybody's doing things to them. That can lead parents sometimes to think my child's turning into an evil person. They're they're not going to be religious. They're not going to be good people. It makes them look like monsters. But in that, it's the Lord's protection, because the Lord doesn't allow people to see their bad behaviours until they're ready to stop doing them.
Yeah.
Because to know you're doing it and still do it is worse than being completely ignorant.
Yeah.
Because they're not freely choosing to do it. So the Lord's protecting people there. I think it says in Isaiah, he stops their ears so they can't hear and their eyes so they can't see, lest they turn and be healed. So if parents knew what was happening there, that children just cannot see the wrong they're doing. And it's good that they can't see the wrong they're doing. They're not turning into evil people. They're just being protected until they're ready to see it for themselves. And my daughter, for example, will come back to me now and say, I put you through the wars, Dad. And my daughter's doing it to me now. She knows the wisdom of that.
Yeah.
So they come back to you.
Yeah.
But having that knowledge for Swedenborg, I mean, why does society not know these things? It's almost unfair that we're deprived of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack. Look, I'm going to open up for questions. If anybody's got anything that they want to ask Jack, it's been good for me to chat with him, but I just wonder if anybody else has got anything. I haven't seen anything come in on the chat, although there's a few people watching. Neville, you got anything? You got first dibs, seeing as you're sitting here.
Jack, yeah, that was really fascinating, to hear your journey, through life, bringing you, to where you are now. I thought that was remarkable. If I try and compare it with my own experience, completely different, but there we are. That's what life's all about. But certainly what you were just saying, just towards the end there about, the way children, in that sense, as they're growing up, just don't understand, can't comprehend really. I think you were sort of indicating, that their behaviour and understanding, what's, created their revolting, the revolt against maybe the parents and teachers' attitudes, etc. And I think that's really worthwhile that parents do come to understand that. I found that really helpful, what you had to say. And I can see it, in my own experience with our three daughters, really. I mean, they were all brought up, in the Swedenborgian church, in the new church. But we thought, well, maybe that, they will continue to be growing to become members, but that just didn't happen at all. One of them, the youngest, really had some continuing interest, I think. But the other two tended to go off on their own exploring journey, sort of what I would say almost pseudo spiritual journeys. But yet, as the years have gone by, you seem to see that, as you're indicating as well with your children, they sort of come back, in a sense, to some of the things that they were taught and found useful when they were young. And I think that's really lovely to be able to experience that.
I can really identify with that disappointment that your children don't come to the church. I went through that myself. I think one of the things that really helps me for Swedenborg with that kind of thing is some people have asked me to marry them in the past, but one of the partners isn't in the church the vows that they have to say. For example, that they believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. Sometimes they're very honest about that and say, I can't say that because I don't really know what it means to me and how it works. And I find that a huge help to be able to say, it means Jesus Christ means goodness and truth. And then I can ask them, do you believe in goodness and truth? And they say, of course I do. I say, well, that is what Jesus Christ means. That's what the Lord is, goodness and truth. So they're making a vow to believe in goodness and truth. And being able to take away that sort of, what's attached or what's been attached to certain areas of the church and take it from Swedenborg's angle and see it in that way, it just opens it up to everybody, I think. And also, the experience with children moving away from the church. They're maybe moving away from a church that is a particular way of putting it across, but they're not moving away from the universal church, I think, what the Lord is instilling in people. That's how I feel about it. And it gives me comfort to know that as long as my kids are looking to be good and true, I think that they're still part of the church in a sense.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's the way they live their life is, really, as they according to goodness in implementing truth. Well, that's what it's all really about. And whether they come to church is of real no significance at all. But to see them actually living their lives in that way, it's just wonderful. And knowing that it's all there because this is the way the Lord will lead them, even though we don't, even parents don't see it, of course. And but the Lord is leading them, and they will experience whatever the Lord thinks is in their eternal welfare.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
Jack, I guess we'll finish off quite soon. I just wanted to check. So, with your work on Lomond Radio, are you active on any other platforms? I know you've done some YouTube videos in the past.
Sorry, that it broke up a wee bit there, David.
Oh, sorry. I know you've done some YouTube videos in the past.
Right. I've experimented with YouTube under the ticker, I think, Rev Jack. I'm definitely looking to do more of that in the future on the YouTube side. I'd like to do some videos, and possibly just be outside in nature. Maybe talk about the correspondences of different things in nature, like trees and things, and how that relates to human experiences. I'd like to do that in the future. The YouTube channel's there, but it's quite dormant at the moment, to be honest. I've just got too many other things going on.
Yeah,
but that's definitely something I'm going to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, it takes time, doesn't it, at the end of the day? So how long do you take to prepare a radio show? So the show itself is an hour long. How much time do you spend in preparation for
it? I think usually the most difficult thing is getting started.
Right,
It's like getting started is the most difficult thing. I feel once I get started, it starts to flow and the Lord's inspiration comes through. And my knowledge of the teachings and my experience as a child and growing up as an adult, that kind of merges and enables me to put it together pretty quick, really. So I would say I could quite easily do a full show, put it all together, get it recorded in less than a day.
Okay. And are you working from a script or you're just working spontaneously?
What I do is I write it out, I type it out, and I try and keep it to a set amount of words between songs and have about 10 songs. So I know that if I roughly do about 2,500 words and break it into 10 segments, then that will cover just about an hour. And sometimes I have to say a few things at the end just to kind of take that time up to make it the hour. But I usually get the main subject over within the hour.
Yeah, okay. We just had a comment come in from Leo. I see evidence that children being born will not be fooled as they were years ago. I think that's, yeah, that's certainly true. There's big changes afoot on, in religious and spiritual circles. Here, I know certainly in the UK as well, aren't there, Jack? I think, church is not, it's not what it used to be.
No. I'm guessing that Leo's possibly alluding to the fact that a lot of institutions have been compromised, really, through human power and things like that. And they don't necessarily connect directly with people anymore. So I think he's probably alluding to the fact that young people are becoming more reasoned and connected to God in their own personal, direct way, rather than through institutions and things. I wonder.
Yeah. So he's talking here about a sense of what is true and what is not. That is kind of it's inherent in some way.
Intuitive rather than
taught. Yeah, that's right. People get a sense of that.
I often think, David, about the...
Yeah, go on, Jack. Final thought.
There's a story that the Lord talks about in the Word where he goes to the pool of Bethsaida. It's all the kind of injured people and crippled people and disabled people are running about the pool. And the Lord goes to this man, and he's been maimed for 30 odd years. And the man says that I can't get into the pool because every time I go, somebody gets in before me. And the Lord says, do you believe? And he says, yes. And he says, stand up and walk. So the Lord cures him direct. He doesn't need to go to the pool. And I do think in that story somewhere the Lord's telling us that we can go straight to the Lord. We don't have to go through, necessarily go through an institution. We can directly connect with the Lord. So if we feel we've got some spiritual ailment that we need healed, we can go directly to the Lord. And as long as we're sincere and we believe in the Lord, I do feel that he'll heal us directly. Yeah.
I think that's true. And I certainly see evidence of it on YouTube. Number of YouTube channels talking about the spiritual awakening, what it's like to awaken spiritually, helping people, helping to guide people through that process. And obviously it's something it's there. I don't know in what sort of numbers, but it certainly is there. And as I say, outside of the traditional religious institutions that we've typically relied on. Yeah. Look, Jack, I'm going to wind it up now. Thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you, David.
Morning for you, this evening for us. Yeah. It's been great to have a chat. As I said, I'll put links down below to Jack's Lomond Radio, and you're going to send me that link for, what was it, Mixcloud? Is that right?
Mixcloud, yeah. Mixcloud.
So I'll drop that in for the information for anyone who's watching the recording of the chat. So again, Jack, thanks for joining us. It's been great to reconnect with you, and I wish you
thanks to Level.
And
stuff.
Thank you very much. And what I will say before we sign off is we don't have a meeting in May because the last Friday in May is Anzac Day holiday in Australia. So the equivalent of Remembrance Day for you guys in the UK. We have two. We have Remembrance Day and Anzac Day, but Anzac Day is our public holiday. So we won't have a meeting here in April. We will in May, and we have Joe Vandermeer coming along, who is the director or the key person at the Swedenborg Association of Australia. He'll be talking to us about his work and his journey as well. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jack. I say, great to reconnect with you, and
thanks, David.
We'll look forward to maybe having a chat another time.
Brilliant. God bless.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.